San Francisco, California, Saturday, 2:47 p.m. Sebastian Cross sat in his silver Porsche 911 outside St. Mary's Cathedral, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the edge of a cliff. Through the tinted windows, he could see the parade of San Francisco's elite filing into the church. Old money, new money, and the kind of money that bought politicians like trading cards. His wedding was supposed to start in 13 minutes. His phone buzzed for the 15th time in the last hour. Another text from his father. "Where the hell are you? The Whitmore family is asking questions." Sebastian deleted it without reading the rest. He knew what Richard Cross wanted, the same thing he'd wanted since Sebastian turned 18. A merger disguised as marriage. The Cross Industries empire united with Whitmore Holdings, creating an unstoppable financial dynasty. What his father didn't understand was that Sebastian would rather drive his Porsche off the Golden Gate Bridge than spend the rest of his life pretending to love Madison Whitmore III, a woman who spoke in trust fund terminology and whose idea of passion was a heated debate about yacht club membership fees. But defying Richard Cross wasn't just difficult, it was financial suicide. Sebastian's inheritance, his position as CEO, his entire identity was tied to this wedding. One no at the altar, and he'd lose everything he'd worked for. Almost everything. The smell hit him first, something incredible wafting through his partially open window. Garlic, onions, something smoky and utterly tempting. Sebastian's stomach growled, reminding him that he'd been too nervous to eat anything all day. He followed the scent like a man possessed, driving slowly through the streets until he spotted it. A gleaming silver food truck parked in Golden Gate Park, with Savannah's gourmet street food painted in elegant script across the side. A last meal for a condemned man, he thought grimly. Sebastian parked and approached the truck, loosening his Tom Ford tie. The aroma was even more intoxicating up close. Bacon, caramelized onions, and something that made his mouth water despite his dread. "We're closed, honey," came a voice from inside the truck. "Wedding catering prep." "I'll pay double," Sebastian called out, surprising himself with how desperate he sounded. "Triple." A blonde head popped out of the service window, and Sebastian felt like he'd been struck by lightning. She was absolutely stunning. Not in the polished, artificial way of the women in his social circle, but naturally, radiantly beautiful. Golden hair caught the afternoon sun, cascading in loose waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were the color of sea glass, and when she smiled, it was like watching the sunrise. "Well," she said, tilting her head with amusement. "Triple does have a nice ring to it. What can I get you, stranger?" "Sebastian," he said automatically, then caught himself. The last thing he needed was to be recognized. "I mean, what do you recommend?" Savannah Blake, though he didn't know her name yet, studied him with those incredible eyes. Designer suit, expensive watch, the kind of desperate politeness that screamed old money trying not to be old money. "You look like a man who needs comfort food," she said, disappearing back into the truck. "How do you feel about my signature bacon-wrapped jalapeno burger with truffle aioli?" "Perfect," Sebastian said, though he would have agreed to anything just to keep hearing her voice. "Coming right up, handsome." Sebastian's heart did something strange, a flutter he hadn't felt since, well, ever. Madison certainly didn't make his pulse race. Neither had any of the carefully selected debutantes his father had paraded past him over the years. He checked his watch. 2:52 p.m. 8 minutes until I do. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his best man, James. "Dude, where are you? Your dad is turning purple." Sebastian turned the phone off. "So," Savannah's voice drifted from the truck, along with the sizzling sounds of culinary magic. "What's a guy in a $1,000 suit doing at my food truck on a Saturday afternoon?" "How do you know it's a $1,000 suit?" "Honey, I grew up in Beverly Hills before I escaped to find my soul. I know money when I see it." Her laugh was like champagne bubbles. "The question is, what are you running from?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "My life." "That bad, huh? I'm supposed to be getting married in..." He checked his watch again. 6 minutes. Savannah's head appeared at the window again, this time with raised eyebrows. "And you're here instead because I'd rather eat a burger with a beautiful stranger than promise to love someone I barely know." The words hung in the air between them. Savannah studied his face, and Sebastian felt more exposed than he had in years. This woman, this gorgeous, genuine woman, was looking at him like she could see straight through all his armor. "Well then," she said softly, "I better make this the best damn burger you've ever had." She disappeared again, and Sebastian found himself leaning against her truck like a lovesick teenager. The afternoon sun felt warmer, the world looked brighter, and for the first time in months he could breathe freely. "Order up." Savannah appeared with a plate that looked like art, the burger perfectly constructed, sweet potato fries golden and crispy, a small ramekin of what looked like gourmet mustard on the side. "This looks incredible," Sebastian said, accepting the plate. Their fingers brushed, and the electric shock that ran through him nearly made him drop everything. "Try the mustard," Savannah said, her voice slightly breathless. "I make it myself with craft beer and honey." Sebastian reached for the ramekin, just as Savannah leaned out to point at it. Their coordination was magnificently awful. He knocked her arm, she lost her balance, and suddenly Sebastian Cross, billionaire CEO, was wearing approximately 3 cups of artisanal beer mustard. It dripped from his hair, soaked through his Italian silk shirt, and pooled in his hand-stitched leather shoes. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of church bells beginning to chime 3 o'clock. "Oh my God," Savannah breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, I am so—" "It's okay," Sebastian said, and realized he meant it. He was covered in mustard, missing his own wedding and probably about to lose everything he'd ever known. And he was smiling. "It's really not okay," Savannah said, scrambling out of the truck with a handful of napkins. "You're supposed to be at your wedding right now, and I just saved me," Sebastian finished quietly. Savannah stopped mid-reach with the napkins, her eyes widening. "What?" "You saved me." Sebastian looked down at his mustard-soaked appearance and laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt foreign in his throat. "I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, and you saved me with condiments." "I don't understand." Sebastian stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume beneath the food truck aromas, something light and floral that made him dizzy. "I don't want to marry Madison Whitmore," he said. "I never did. But I've been too much of a coward to admit it. Too afraid of disappointing my father, too worried about losing everything I thought I wanted." His phone started buzzing frantically, call after call that he ignored. "But standing here, covered in your incredible mustard, talking to the most beautiful woman I've ever met." Sebastian shook his head in wonder. "I realize I don't want the life they've planned for me. I want something real." Savannah's eyes were wide, searching his face. "You don't even know me." "No," Sebastian agreed. "But I'd like to." The church bells finished tolling 3 o'clock. Somewhere across the city, 300 wedding guests were realizing the groom wasn't coming. His father was probably having a coronary. Madison was either relieved or mortified, possibly both. And Sebastian Cross, for the first time in his 32 years, felt completely, utterly free. "So," he said, grinning at the gorgeous woman who had just turned his world upside down with a food truck accident, "Want to grab dinner sometime? Somewhere that doesn't involve me wearing the condiments?" Savannah looked at him, really looked at him, taking in his mustard-covered designer suit, his hopeful smile, the way he stood like a man who had just discovered he could fly. "You know what?" she said, her own smile blooming like sunshine. "I think I'd like that very much." San Francisco. 3 hours later. Sebastian's phone had stopped buzzing an hour ago, which was somehow worse than when it wouldn't stop. The silence meant his father had moved past anger into strategy mode. And Richard Cross in strategy mode was like a hurricane gathering strength. He sat across from Savannah at Tony's Little Star Pizza in North Beach, still wearing his mustard-stained shirt because somehow, changing clothes felt like admitting this was temporary. Like acknowledging he might have to go back to his old life. You're going to tell me you're having second thoughts, Savannah said, not looking up from her margarita slice. She'd changed into jeans and a soft cream sweater that made her hair look like spun gold. Are you a mind reader now? No, but you've checked your phone 14 times in the last 10 minutes and you look like a man who just jumped out of an airplane and realized his parachute might not open. Sebastian set his phone face down on the red checkered tablecloth. I abandoned 300 wedding guests, including the governor of California and 2 senators. My father probably had to physically restrain my mother from storming Golden Gate Park with the National Guard. Sounds dramatic. You don't understand. My family doesn't just have money, Savannah. We are money. Cross Industries owns half the commercial real estate in California. When a Cross makes a decision, it moves markets. Savannah finally looked up, those sea-glass eyes studying him with an intensity that made his chest tight. And when a Cross breaks a promise? Empires crumble. She was quiet for a long moment, twirling cheese around her fork. The restaurant hummed with Saturday evening energy, families, couples, friends laughing over wine and carbs, normal people living normal lives. Tell me about her, Savannah said suddenly. Madison? The woman you were supposed to marry 3 hours ago. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, still slightly sticky with artisanal mustard. Madison Whitmore is perfect. On paper, Stanford MBA, sits on 4 charity boards, speaks 3 languages, plays classical piano. Her family owns the largest private equity firm on the West Coast. You sound like you're reading her resume. Because that's all she ever was to me. A merger disguised as marriage. Sebastian leaned back in his chair. We've known each other since we were kids. Same social circle, same schools, same expectations. Everyone always assumed we'd end up together. But you never loved her. It wasn't a question. I tried to, Sebastian said honestly. God knows I tried. Madison deserves someone who looks at her like she hung the stars. But when I'm with her, I feel like I'm suffocating in silk and good intentions. Savannah's expression softened. And with me? With you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. The words hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Savannah reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The same electric shock from earlier, but stronger now. Sebastian, she began, but was interrupted by the sharp ring of his phone. The display showed James Morrison, his best man and oldest friend. I should take this, Sebastian said apologetically. Cross, where the fuck are you? James's voice was loud enough for Savannah to hear even when Sebastian held the phone away from his ear. Nice to hear from you too, James. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? Your father is calling in every favor he's ever owed. Madison's family is threatening to pull out of the Monterey development deal. The Chronicle is already running stories about the runaway billionaire. Sebastian's stomach dropped. They're running stories? Front page of the evening edition, my friend. Crossair abandons altar. Where is Sebastian Cross? Complete with speculation about your mental health, your fitness to run the company, and whether this is all some elaborate publicity stunt. Savannah's eyes widened. She was hearing every word. James, I need you to listen to me very carefully. No, you listen. Whatever midlife crisis you're having, whatever this is about, you need to fix it. Now. Come to the house, apologize to everyone, blame it on pre-wedding nerves, and reschedule for next month. I'm not having a midlife crisis. Then what the hell would you call this? Sebastian looked at Savannah, who was watching him with a mixture of concern and dawning realization. I'd call it waking up. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, Sebastian, your father is threatening to invoke the succession clause. The world tilted. The succession clause, the legal mechanism that would remove Sebastian as CEO if the board deemed him unfit to serve the company's interests. It had been his father's insurance policy, designed to prevent scandal from touching the Cross name. He can't do that. He can, if he has board support. And right now, after you embarrassed the most powerful families in California, he's got it. Sebastian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his empire, his identity, crumbling in real time. How long do I have? Emergency board meeting Monday morning. 72 hours to fix this, Sebastian, or you lose everything. The line went dead. Sebastian set the phone down with shaking hands. Across the table, Savannah was very still, very quiet. You're Sebastian Cross, she said finally. As in Cross Industries' Sebastian Cross? Yes. Billionaire heir, CEO, one of the most eligible bachelors in America according to last month's Forbes. Guilty as charged. Savannah leaned back in her chair, processing. And I'm Savannah Blake, food truck owner, community college dropout, daughter of a mechanic from Bakersfield. Your point? My point is that you're slumming it, Sebastian. This, she gestured between them, is you acting out. Rich boy rebels against daddy, has fling with the working class girl, then goes back to his real life. Sebastian reached for her hands, but she pulled them away. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Savannah's voice was getting stronger, more defensive. In 3 days, you're going to realize you can't actually give up your billions for a woman you met this afternoon. You're going to apologize to Madison, marry her in a private ceremony, and this will become a funny story you tell at cocktail parties. Savannah. And I'll be the food truck girl who almost brought down a dynasty. She stood up, grabbing her purse. Thanks for the pizza, Sebastian, but I think this is where our story ends. She turned to leave, but Sebastian caught her wrist gently. What if it doesn't have to be? What doesn't have to be? What if I choose you? Sebastian stood facing her. What if I walk away from all of it, the money, the company, the life I was born into, and we build something real together? Savannah stared at him, and for a moment Sebastian saw hope flicker in her eyes. Then reality crashed back in. You don't even know me, she said quietly. We've known each other for 6 hours. Then let me get to know you. Give me a chance to prove this isn't some rich boy rebellion. Give us a chance to see what this could be. And if your family destroys me in the process, if they decide I'm a threat and make my life hell? Sebastian thought about his father's resources, his connections, his ruthless efficiency when eliminating obstacles. I won't let that happen. You might not have a choice. She pulled her wrist free and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. For what it's worth, she said, I hope you figure out who you really want to be, Sebastian Cross. But I can't be collateral damage in your journey of self-discovery. And then she was gone, leaving Sebastian alone in a pizza parlor, covered in mustard, with 72 hours to choose between everything he'd ever known and a woman who made him feel alive. Outside, the San Francisco fog was rolling in, shrouding the city in mist and uncertainty. Sebastian's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the Fairmont tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Madison. He stared at the message for a long moment, then looked toward the door where Savannah had disappeared. 72 hours to save his empire, or 72 hours to lose his soul. The clock was ticking. The Fairmont Hotel, Sunday, 9 a.m. Sebastian hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights and thinking about sea glass eyes and the way Savannah's laugh had sounded like freedom. Every time he closed his eyes, he could smell her perfume mixed with food truck smoke, could feel the electricity when their fingers touched. Now, walking through the marble lobby of the Fairmont, he felt like a man approaching his execution. Madison Whitmore III sat in the hotel's garden court like she was holding court at Versailles. Even in crisis, she was impeccably put together. Blonde hair in a perfect chignon, cream-colored Chanel suit, pearls that probably cost more than most people's cars. She looked like she'd stepped out of a society magazine. She also looked dangerous. Sebastian. Her voice was cool, controlled. No hint of the woman who was supposed to have been devastated yesterday. You look terrible. He did. The mustard stains were gone, but he'd thrown on jeans and a simple white button-down, casual clothes that felt like armor against the world he was supposed to inherit. Madison, Sit. It wasn't a request. Sebastian sat across from her, noting how she'd chosen a table in full view of the lobby. Nothing private about this meeting. Everything calculated for maximum visibility. Coffee? Madison poured from an elegant silver service without waiting for his answer. Her movements were precise, practiced. I took the liberty of ordering your usual, Ethiopian single origin, no cream. How are you so calm about this? Madison's smile was sharp as crystal. Because, darling, while you were having your little breakdown, I was handling damage control. She slid a leather portfolio across the table. Sebastian opened it to find newspaper clippings, printouts of social media posts, and what looked like a comprehensive crisis management strategy. Billionaire heir's wedding day meltdown, she read from the top clipping. Where is Sebastian Cross? Cross Industries stock plummets after CEO vanishes. Should I continue? Sebastian's stomach churned. He'd known there would be fallout, but seeing it in black and white made it real. The Examiner is calling it the wedding of the century that wasn't, Madison continued. TMZ has a bounty out for photos of you. And don't even get me started on Twitter. Runaway billionaire is trending. Madison, I'm sorry. No, you're not. Her voice cut like ice. If you were sorry, you would have shown up. You would have gone through with the ceremony and we could have figured out the rest later. Sebastian looked up from the clippings. The rest? Did you really think I wanted to marry you, Sebastian? Madison laughed, but there was no humor in it. We've known each other since we were children. I've watched you charm every debutante from here to Boston, and not once, have you ever looked at me like I was anything more than a business transaction. Sebastian felt like he'd been slapped. Then why? Because I'm not stupid, and I'm not romantic. Madison leaned forward, her blue eyes glittering. I'm practical. Our marriage would have been a merger, yes, but a profitable one. For both our families, and eventually, for us. She pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. Sebastian's blood ran cold. It was a photo of him and Savannah at Tony's Pizza, clearly taken through the window. Her hand on his across the table, both of them laughing. The caption read, Mystery Woman. Who is Sebastian Cross's secret girlfriend? Her name is Savannah Blake, Madison said, watching his face. 28 years old, owns a food truck called Savannah's Gourmet Street Food. Grew up in Bakersfield. Parents divorced when she was 16. Worked her way through community college. No trust fund, no family connections, no social media presence worth mentioning. How did you? I have resources, Sebastian. The same resources that could make her life very difficult or... Madison's smile turned predatory. Very easy. What do you want? I want you to think very carefully about what you're throwing away. Madison closed the portfolio. Your father is meeting with the board this afternoon. As of tomorrow morning, you'll no longer be CEO of Cross Industries unless you fix this. I know about the succession clause. Do you know about the rest of it? Madison pulled out another document. The trust fund provisions, the family foundation board seats, the property holdings. If you're deemed unfit to lead the company, you lose access to all of it, including your penthouse, your cars, and your stock options. Sebastian stared at the legal document, his father's signature bold at the bottom. He'll leave you with nothing, Sebastian. And then what? You'll live in some cramped apartment working at... What? What exactly do you know how to do besides run a company you inherited? The words hit their target. Sebastian had never worked a regular job, never worried about rent or grocery bills, never lived without the safety net of infinite wealth. But it doesn't have to be that way. Madison continued, her voice softening into something almost kind. We can fix this. A simple statement about pre-wedding jitters, a rescheduled ceremony, maybe a honeymoon in Europe to let things cool down. Your father gets his merger. I get my social position. And you get to keep everything you've ever known. And Savannah? Madison's expression hardened again. What about her? You leave her alone. That depends entirely on you. Madison stood, smoothing her skirt. I'm not unreasonable, Sebastian. I understand that marriage doesn't preclude... Other arrangements. Many successful couples have found ways to maintain their public duties while pursuing private interests. Sebastian felt sick. You're talking about having affairs. I'm talking about being adults, about understanding that love is a luxury most people in our position can't afford. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. You have until 5 o'clock tonight to decide. After that, I withdraw my offer and let your family handle this their way. And Sebastian? Madison paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. They won't be as generous as I'm being. She walked away, her heels clicking across the marble like a countdown timer. Sebastian sat alone at the table, staring at the portfolio of his own destruction. Around him, the Fairmont buzzed with normal Sunday morning activity. Families heading to brunch, couples reading newspapers, children laughing. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the news. If you want to talk, I'll be at my truck in Golden Gate Park until 3. Sebastian's heart hammered against his ribs. Savannah was giving him another chance. But at what cost? He looked at Madison's ultimatum, then at Savannah's text. 2 different futures stretching out before him, one safe and suffocating, one uncertain and alive. Outside, San Francisco gleamed in the morning sun, beautiful and treacherous as a siren's song. Sebastian Cross had 7 hours to choose who he wanted to be, and everyone he'd ever known was betting he'd choose wrong. He stood up from the table, leaving Madison's portfolio behind, and walked toward the exit, toward Golden Gate Park, toward the woman who made him feel like he could fly, even if it meant crashing to earth. His phone rang as he reached the lobby doors. Dad, flashed on the screen. Sebastian declined the call and stepped into the California sunshine. Some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt. He was about to find out if love was worth the ashes. Golden Gate Park, Sunday, 2:47 p.m. Sebastian found Savannah exactly where she said she'd be, but she wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered around her food truck, not customers, but reporters. Camera crews, photographers with long lenses, journalists shoving microphones toward the service window. Sebastian recognized the aggressive energy of a media-feeding frenzy. Miss Blake, can you confirm your relationship with Sebastian Cross? How long have you two been seeing each other? Did you know he was engaged when you started the affair? Savannah stood behind her service counter like a fortress under siege, her golden hair pulled back in a messy bun, her face pale but determined. She spotted Sebastian approaching through the crowd and their eyes met across the chaos. Something passed between them. Recognition, relief, and an electric charge that made Sebastian's chest tight. No comment, Savannah said firmly, pulling down the metal service window with a clang. We're closed. Miss Blake, just one question. She said no comment. Sebastian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The crowd turned as one, cameras swiveling toward him like weapons. And I suggest you respect that. The feeding frenzy intensified. Flashes exploded, questions flew like arrows. Sebastian, where have you been? Are you having a nervous breakdown? What does this mean for Cross Industries? Sebastian ignored them all, pushing through the crowd toward Savannah's truck. She had emerged from the side door, her sea-glass eyes wide with something between anger and desperation. This is what I was talking about, she said when he reached her, her voice barely audible over the shouting reporters. This is my life now. I can't go to the grocery store without someone taking my picture. I've had 3 different news vans parked outside my apartment since 6 this morning. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay my rent when I can't work because there's a media circus everywhere I go. Savannah's composure was cracking, revealing the exhaustion underneath. Sorry doesn't protect me when your family decides I'm a threat. Sebastian reached for her hand, but she stepped back. We need to talk, he said. Privately. Savannah glanced at the growing crowd of reporters. Where exactly do you suggest we do that? Your penthouse, my food truck? Both are probably being watched. Sebastian made a decision. Come with me. Sebastian, trust me. He held out his hand again. Please. This time she took it. Sebastian led her through the park, away from the cameras and questions. toward a secluded grove of eucalyptus trees where he'd hidden as a child during family picnics. The reporters followed at first, but Sebastian knew the park's hidden paths better than they did. Within 10 minutes, they'd lost their tail. They walked in silence until they reached a small clearing overlooking the bay. San Francisco spread out below them like a glittering promise, the water sparkling in the afternoon sun. "I used to come here when I was a kid," Sebastian said, settling on a fallen log. "Whenever my parents dragged me to charity events or society functions, I'd sneak away and hide here until they found me." Savannah remained standing, arms crossed. "Already planning your escape routes even then?" "Maybe." Sebastian looked up at her, drinking in the sight of her face. "Or maybe I was waiting for something worth staying for." "Don't." Savannah's voice was sharp. "Don't say things like that to me." "Why not?" "Because I'm not strong enough to keep saying no to you." She finally sat down but kept distance between them. "Because every time you look at me like that, I forget all the reasons this is impossible." "What if it's not impossible?" "Sebastian." Savannah turned to face him fully. "I talked to my sister this morning. She's a paralegal in Los Angeles. She did some research on your family." Sebastian's stomach dropped. "The Cross family has resources I can't even comprehend. Politicians on speed dial, judges who owe favors, media connections that could destroy someone like me without breaking a sweat." Savannah's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "If they want me gone, I'm gone. And there's nothing you can do to stop them." "You're wrong." "Am I? What happens when your father decides I'm a liability? When he finds out about my mother's drinking problem, or my brother's arrest record, or the fact that I defaulted on student loans 3 years ago? What happens when he uses those things to paint me as a gold digger in the press?" Sebastian felt the blood drain from his face. "How do you know he'll—" "Because that's what powerful families do to protect their interests. They find leverage, and they use it." Savannah's smile was sad and knowing. "I may not have grown up in your world, Sebastian, but I'm not naive about how it works." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of reality settling between them like a wall. "There might be a way," Sebastian said finally. "What do you mean?" Sebastian told her about his meeting with Madison, about the ultimatum, the offer of a marriage in name only, the possibility of maintaining their relationship in secret. Savannah listened without interruption, her expression growing colder with each word. "So let me understand this," she said when he finished. "Your ex-fiancé is offering to let you keep me as your mistress. How generous." That's exactly what it is." Savannah stood up abruptly, pacing away from him. "I would be your dirty little secret, the working-class girl you visit when you need to feel real." "You're twisting this." "Am I?" Savannah whirled around, her eyes blazing. "Tell me, Sebastian, in this arrangement Madison is offering, where do I fit in your public life? Do I get to attend charity galas, corporate events, or do I stay hidden away while you play happy family with your society wife?" Sebastian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because the truth was Madison's offer hadn't included any provision for Savannah's dignity, only her discretion. "I see." Savannah's voice went quiet, which somehow hurt more than if she'd shouted. "You already know the answer." "Savannah, please. No." She held up a hand. "I may not have your money or your connections, but I have something you clearly don't understand. Self-respect." She started walking back toward the path. "Wait." Sebastian caught up to her, grabbing her arm gently. "What if I don't take Madison's deal? What if I walk away from all of it?" "And do what? Live in poverty with me? Work at my food truck?" Savannah shook her head. "You'd last about 6 months before you started resenting everything you gave up. And I'd spend every day wondering when you were going to realize you made a mistake. You don't know that, don't I?" Savannah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Sebastian, you've never been poor. You've never worried about making rent or choosing between groceries and gas money. You've never had to smile and be grateful when someone treats you like you don't matter because you need the job. I could learn. Could you? Could you really be happy living in a studio apartment and eating ramen for dinner? Could you handle people treating you like you're nobody special? Sebastian wanted to say yes. The word was right there on his tongue. But something in Savannah's eyes, a challenge, a test, made him pause. Could he? Could he really give up everything he'd ever known for a woman he'd met 2 days ago? The hesitation lasted only a moment, but it was enough. I thought so, Savannah said softly. And that's why this has to end now before we both get hurt worse than we already are. She started walking again, faster this time. Savannah, Sebastian called after her. What if you're wrong? What if I could make it work? She stopped but didn't turn around. Then prove it, she said. Don't just say you'll give up your old life. Actually do it. Make your choice and live with the consequences. And when you've spent 6 months learning who Sebastian Cross really is without his family's money and power, come find me. And if I do? Savannah finally turned, and the look in her eyes made Sebastian's heart stop. Then maybe we'll have something real to build on. She walked away, leaving Sebastian alone in the clearing as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. His phone buzzed. A text from Madison. 1 hour left. Don't make me withdraw my offer. Sebastian stared at the message, then at the path where Savannah had disappeared. 1 hour to choose between everything he'd ever been and everything he might become. The city lights were starting to twinkle below, beautiful and ruthless as the empire he'd been born to inherit, or abandon. Sebastian Cross closed his eyes and made his choice. Cross Industries boardroom, Sunday, 4:52 p.m. Sebastian walked into the emergency board meeting 8 minutes before Madison's deadline, and the silence that greeted him was deafening. 12 of the most powerful people in California sat around the mahogany conference table like judges at a tribunal. His father, Richard Cross, occupied the head of the table with the bearing of a king holding court. Madison sat to his right, perfectly composed, her earlier ultimatum invisible behind a mask of concerned sympathy. Sebastian, Richard's voice could have frozen champagne. How good of you to join us. Dad. Sebastian took the empty chair at the foot of the table, the defendant's seat. Every eye in the room tracked his movement, calculating, measuring, finding him wanting. I trust you've had time to consider the gravity of your actions yesterday, Richard continued. The damage to our family's reputation, to our business relationships, to the trust our shareholders place in Cross Industries. Sebastian nodded, his throat dry. I have. Good. Richard leaned back in his leather chair. Then you understand why the board has concerns about your fitness to continue as CEO. I understand their concerns, Sebastian said carefully. I don't necessarily share them. A murmur rippled around the table. Margaret Hendricks, the family's longtime attorney, cleared her throat. Sebastian, your father has prepared a statement for you to sign, she said, sliding a document across the polished wood. It attributes yesterday's incident to pre-wedding stress and confirms your engagement to Miss Whitmore remains intact. There's also a provision for immediate medical leave to address any underlying issues. Sebastian picked up the statement, scanning the corporate legalese that would reduce the most important decision of his life to a footnote about temporary emotional instability. And if I don't sign? Then we invoke the succession clause, Richard said flatly. You'll be removed as CEO effective immediately. Your trust fund will be frozen pending a competency evaluation. Your position on this board, your stake in the company, your access to family assets, all of it goes away. You'd leave me with nothing. You'd be leaving yourself with nothing, Madison interjected, her voice soft and reasonable. Sebastian, we're trying to help you. This doesn't have to be the end of your life as you know it. Sebastian looked around the table at faces he'd known since childhood. Family friends, business partners, people who'd attended his birthday parties and graduation ceremonies. Not one of them looked sympathetic to his plight. What about Cross Industries? He asked. If I'm removed, who takes over? The board will appoint an interim CEO, Richard said, someone with proven leadership experience and unquestioned judgment. Sebastian's eyes found Madison's. She gave him the slightest nod. Of course. She wouldn't just marry him, She'd replace him. The choice is yours, Sebastian, Richard continued. Sign the statement, marry Madison as planned, and resume your responsibilities. Or walk away and discover what life looks like without the Cross family name to protect you. Sebastian stared at the document in his hands. 2 signatures would restore everything: his position, his wealth, his comfortable cage. He'd marry Madison in a private ceremony. They'd maintain their public facade, and he could see Savannah in secret. It was practical, safe, manageable. It was also everything Savannah had accused him of being too weak to reject. I need a moment, Sebastian said, standing. Sebastian, Richard's voice held a warning. One moment, Dad. Please. Sebastian walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown San Francisco. The city sparkled in the early evening light, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Savannah was probably closing up her food truck, wondering if he'd chosen money over love, wondering if she'd been right about him all along. His phone buzzed. A text from James. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Sebastian almost laughed. Everyone kept warning him about burning bridges, but no one seemed to understand that some bridges were meant to burn, that some cages, no matter how gilded, were still cages. He thought about Savannah's challenge. Spend 6 months learning who Sebastian Cross really is without money and power. He thought about her eyes when she'd walked away, the mixture of hope and heartbreak that told him she wanted to be wrong about him as much as he did. He thought about waking up every morning next to Madison, playing the dutiful husband while his soul slowly died. Sebastian turned back to the table, where 12 pairs of eyes waited for his surrender. I've made my decision, he said. Richard leaned forward. And? Sebastian picked up the statement, held it for a moment, then tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the boardroom like a gunshot. Sebastian! Madison was on her feet, her composure finally cracking. You don't know what you're doing. For the first time in my life, Sebastian said, I know exactly what I'm doing. You're throwing away everything. Richard's voice boomed across the table. 32 years of preparation, of grooming you to lead this company, and you're destroying it for some food truck girl. Her name is Savannah Blake, Sebastian said quietly. And yes, I'm choosing her over this. The boardroom erupted. Voices raised in outrage, shock, desperate attempts to make him reconsider. Sebastian heard none of it. He was thinking about mustard-covered suits and pizza parlor conversations and the way Savannah's hand had felt in his. The succession clause takes effect immediately, Margaret said when the noise died down. Security will escort you from the building. All company property, including your corporate credit cards, your company car, and your building access, will be deactivated within the hour. I understand. Your personal assets tied to the family trust are frozen pending legal review. That includes your penthouse, your investment accounts, and your monthly allowance. I understand. Sebastian. Richard stood, his face flushed with rage and something that might have been grief. If you walk out that door, you're not just leaving the company. You're leaving this family. There's no coming back from this. Sebastian looked at his father, the man who'd shaped every day of his life, who'd taught him that power was the only currency that mattered, that love was a luxury successful men couldn't afford. I know, Sebastian said. Goodbye, Dad. He walked toward the door, each step feeling like jumping off a cliff without knowing if his parachute would open. Sebastian! Madison's voice stopped him at the threshold. He turned to see her standing at the far end of the table, her perfect composure finally shattered. You'll regret this. When you're living in some squalid apartment, working some menial job, barely scraping by, you'll remember what you gave up for a woman you barely know. Sebastian smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in days. Maybe, he said, but at least I'll be living. He walked out of Cross Industries for the last time, leaving behind everything he'd ever been to discover who he might become. In the lobby, security was already waiting to escort him out. As they walked past the massive Cross Industries logo, his family name in letters 3 feet tall, Sebastian felt something he'd never experienced before. Freedom. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the news. If you need a job, I know someone who might be hiring. The pay is terrible and you'll probably hate it, but it's honest work. Sebastian laughed out loud, drawing stares from the security guards. He typed back, "When do I start?" The response came immediately. "Tomorrow. 6 a.m. Don't be late." Sebastian Cross, former billionaire, ex-CEO, newly minted nobody, walked out into the San Francisco evening with nothing but the clothes on his back and the most terrifying, exhilarating feeling of his life. He was free. Now he just had to figure out if freedom was worth starving for. Mission District, San Francisco, Monday, 5:43 a.m. Sebastian's alarm had been his stomach growling. He'd spent his first night of freedom on a bench in Golden Gate Park after discovering that his key card to his penthouse had indeed been deactivated. The security guard had looked at him with pity and confusion. Here was Sebastian Cross, heir to billions, standing in the lobby in yesterday's clothes, asking to be let into his own home. "Sorry, Mr. Cross. Orders from building management." So Sebastian had wandered the streets until exhaustion overtook pride, finally collapsing on a park bench around 3 a.m. He'd slept fitfully, waking every hour to the sounds of a city that never truly slept. Sirens, late-night revelers, the rustle of homeless camps he'd never noticed from the back seat of his BMW. Now, as the sun painted the sky pink over San Francisco Bay, Sebastian walked through the Mission District toward Savannah's food truck, every muscle in his body aching from a night on unforgiving wood. The neighborhood was already coming alive, construction workers heading to job sites, nurses finishing night shifts, families getting children ready for school. Real people living real lives, none of them recognizing the former billionaire shuffling past in wrinkled clothes. He found Savannah's truck parked outside Dolores Park, steam already rising from the exhaust vents. The smell of bacon and coffee made his empty stomach clench with hunger. "You look like hell," Savannah said when she saw him approach. She was setting up her prep station, efficient and graceful in worn jeans and a Savannah's Gourmet t-shirt. "I feel worse than I look." "When's the last time you ate?" Sebastian tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think." Savannah stopped what she was doing and really looked at him, taking in his stubble, his wrinkled clothes, the exhaustion in his eyes. "Jesus, Sebastian. Where did you sleep?" "Golden Gate Park. Bench near the Rose Garden. 5 stars. Would not recommend." "You slept outside?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Why didn't you go to a hotel?" Sebastian pulled out his wallet and opened it. 3 $20 bills and a credit card that had probably been canceled 12 hours ago. $60 to my name, he said. "I figured I should save it for food." Savannah stared at the pathetic contents of his wallet, something unreadable crossing her face. "Get in the truck," she said quietly. "What?" "Get in the truck, Sebastian. You're going to pass out if you don't eat something." He climbed into the cramped interior of the food truck, immediately overwhelmed by the controlled chaos. Every inch of space was utilized, ingredients organized with military precision, cooking surfaces that had seen thousands of meals, the lingering aroma of a dozen different spices. Savannah handed him a plate loaded with scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, and buttered sourdough toast. It looked like the most beautiful meal he'd ever seen. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't started working." Sebastian took a bite of the eggs and nearly groaned with relief. "What exactly will I be doing?" "Everything I don't want to do," Savannah said, tying an apron around her waist. "Prep work, cleaning, inventory, dealing with the health inspector when he shows up randomly to make my life difficult. You'll work 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. The pay is $15 an hour." Sebastian did quick math. "That's $900 a week, before taxes. Welcome to how the other 99% lives." Savannah began prepping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Think you can handle it?" Sebastian looked around the tiny workspace that would be his world for the foreseeable future. Yesterday at this time, he'd been CEO of a billion-dollar company. Now he was about to become the lowest-paid employee of a one-woman food truck operation. "I can handle it," he said. "We'll see." The morning rush started at 7, and Sebastian quickly discovered that handling it and actually doing it were vastly different things. His first task was prep work, dicing onions, chopping peppers, grating cheese. Simple enough, except his knife skills were roughly equivalent to a kindergartner with safety scissors. What should have taken 20 minutes took him over an hour, and half the onions were so unevenly cut that Savannah had to redo them. "Have you ever used a knife before?" she asked, trying to hide her frustration. "I've cut steak at restaurants." "That doesn't count." Next came the orders. The morning rush was a relentless parade of commuters wanting breakfast sandwiches, coffee, and efficiency. Savannah moved like a dancer, taking orders, cooking, assembling, serving, while Sebastian fumbled with the simplest tasks. "Order up," Savannah called, sliding a breakfast burrito across the pass. "Sebastian, get that to the customer in the Giant's jacket." Sebastian grabbed the burrito and headed for the window, where a tired-looking construction worker was waiting impatiently. "Breakfast burrito," Sebastian announced cheerfully. The customer looked at him with undisguised irritation. "I ordered a breakfast sandwich, no burrito." Sebastian looked at the order ticket, then back at the customer. "Are you sure? Because this says, 'Kid, I've been ordering the same damn breakfast sandwich from this truck for 2 years. I think I know what I ordered." "Sebastian!" Savannah's voice cut through his confusion. "Wrong order. Table 6 wants the burrito. Giant's jacket ordered the sandwich. Bacon, egg, cheese, sourdough, no tomato." Sebastian felt heat rise in his cheeks as he retreated to fix his mistake. Behind him, he heard the customer mutter to his friend, "New guy's dumber than a box of rocks." The day continued like that, one small catastrophe after another. Sebastian burned hash browns, oversalted eggs, dropped an entire tray of prepped vegetables, and managed to turn a simple coffee order into a 10-minute ordeal when he couldn't figure out how to work the espresso machine. By noon, they'd missed 3 orders, had 2 customer complaints, and Savannah looked like she was ready to murder him. "Take a break," she said during a brief lull, her voice strained. Sebastian sat on a milk crate behind the truck, his entire body aching in ways he'd never experienced. His hands were covered in small cuts from his clumsy knife work. His back screamed from bending over prep stations. His feet throbbed from standing on unforgiving metal flooring. A group of teenagers walked by and he heard one of them say, "Isn't that Sebastian Cross? The guy who ran away from his own wedding?" Their phones came out immediately, cameras pointing in his direction. "Oh shit, it is. He's working at a food truck." Sebastian ducked his head, but it was too late. Within minutes, his location would be all over social media. The humiliation would be complete. Billionaire heir reduced to minimum wage labor, too incompetent to even do that properly. His phone buzzed with notifications, Twitter mentions, Instagram tags, text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. One stood out from James. "It's not too late. Dad's willing to make a deal if you come home now." Sebastian stared at the message, thinking about his comfortable bed, his stocked refrigerator, his life where the hardest decision was which restaurant to visit for lunch. Then he looked through the truck's back window and saw Savannah working alone, covering for his incompetence, dealing with the extra stress he'd brought into her life. He deleted James's message and went back to work. The afternoon was slightly better. He managed to get through lunch rush without any major disasters, learned to work the register without freezing up, and even successfully made coffee that a customer described as drinkable. But by closing time at 8 p.m., Sebastian was ready to collapse. Every muscle in his body screamed. His feet felt like they were on fire. His hands were a roadmap of cuts and burns from a dozen small accidents. "Not bad for a first day," Savannah said as they cleaned up, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I was terrible." "Yeah, you were." She didn't try to spare his feelings. "You've got a lot to learn." Sebastian nodded, accepting the harsh truth. "Will you teach me?" Savannah studied his face in the dim light of the truck's interior, looking for something: sincerity, determination, the will to survive what he'd gotten himself into. "Ask me again tomorrow," she said finally. "If you show up." "I'll show up. We'll see." Sebastian walked out into the San Francisco evening, exhaustion weighing on him like a lead blanket. He had enough money for a cheap motel room, if he could find one that wasn't full or didn't require a credit check. As he wandered through the Mission District, looking for somewhere to spend the night, his phone buzzed one more time. This message was from his father. "You have 24 hours to come to your senses. After that, you're dead to this family." Sebastian looked at the message for a long moment, then turned off his phone. Tomorrow would be another 12-hour shift. Another day of burning food and disappointing customers and proving to himself that he might not be strong enough for the life he'd chosen. But tonight, as he fell asleep on a narrow motel bed that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, Sebastian Cross smiled. Because for the first time in his life, he'd earned something himself, even if it was only $180 and a collection of kitchen burns. It was a start. 3 weeks later, Mission District, Thursday, 5:30 a.m. Sebastian's alarm clock was a cheap plastic thing that sounded like a dying cat, but he'd grown to love it. It meant another day of work, another day of proving to himself and to Savannah that he could survive in the real world. 3 weeks had transformed him in ways that shocked him daily. His hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and scarred from countless kitchen accidents. His body, previously maintained by personal trainers and expensive gym memberships, had been carved lean by 12-hour shifts and physical labor. His apartment, a studio in the Mission that cost half his monthly income, was smaller than his old penthouse's closet, but it was his. Most importantly, he no longer burned the eggs. "Morning, sunshine," Savannah said when he arrived at the truck. She'd started calling him that after his second week when he'd shown up despite a brutal hangover from drowning his sorrows at a dive bar called The Attic. "Morning, boss." Sebastian tied his apron with practiced efficiency. 3 weeks ago he'd struggled with the simple knot. Now his hands moved without thought. "We've got the Castro Street Fair prep today," Savannah reminded him, checking her inventory list. 200 breakfast burritos, 300 signature dogs, and enough coffee to caffeinate half the city. "I know." Sebastian had memorized the prep schedule days ago. "I'll start with the breakfast potatoes." He moved through the morning prep with a competence that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Dice onions, perfect quarter-inch pieces. Prep cheese, grated fine, portioned and ready. Start the coffee, rich, smooth, no bitter aftertaste. Watching him work, Savannah felt something shift in her chest. The entitled billionaire who'd shown up 3 weeks ago covered in mustard was gone. In his place was a man who'd earned every skill through repetition and failure, who'd learned to take criticism without sulking, who showed up every morning despite being exhausted down to his bones. The morning rush arrived like clockwork at 7 a.m., but today Sebastian was ready for it. 2 breakfast sandwiches, 1 with extra bacon, 1 black coffee, 1 cappuccino. Savannah called out orders while Sebastian worked the grill, moving with an efficiency that surprised even him. A regular customer, Mrs. Chen, who worked at the nearby hospital, studied Sebastian with curious eyes as he handed over her order. "You're getting good at this, sweetheart," she said with a smile. "First week I thought you might burn the truck down." "So did I," Sebastian admitted, grinning back. "Have a good day, Mrs. Chen." As she walked away, Sebastian caught Savannah watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" "Nothing," she said quickly, turning back to her prep work. "Just, you remembered her name. She comes in every Tuesday and Thursday, always orders the same thing. Why wouldn't I remember?" But Sebastian knew why it mattered. 3 weeks ago he wouldn't have noticed Mrs. Chen at all. Customers had been faceless obstacles to overcome, not people with names and lives and preferences worth remembering. The lunch rush brought its own challenges, but Sebastian handled them with growing confidence. A difficult customer complaining about wait times? He apologized sincerely and threw in a free cookie. An order mix-up? Fixed it quickly without making the customer feel like it was their fault. A grease fire on the grill? extinguished it calmly, while Savannah handled the window. "Not bad, rookie," said Miguel, who ran the taco truck parked 2 spots down. He'd become Sebastian's unofficial mentor in the economics of food truck survival. "You're starting to look like you belong here." Sebastian felt a surge of pride that was entirely foreign to his old life. This wasn't the hollow satisfaction of closing a business deal or the superficial praise of society parties. This was real accomplishment, the knowledge that he'd earned his place through work and sweat and learning from his mistakes. Around 3 p.m. during the afternoon lull, Sebastian's carefully constructed new world collided with his old one. A black town car pulled up beside the food truck, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and power. Sebastian's stomach dropped as he recognized the passenger stepping out, Catherine Morrison, his mother's best friend, and San Francisco's unofficial queen of high society. She approached the truck window with the bearing of someone accustomed to being catered to, her Hermes handbag probably worth more than Sebastian's monthly income. "Sebastian Cross," she said, her voice carrying across the small space. "I hardly recognized you." Several customers turned to stare. Sebastian felt their eyes on him like a physical weight. "Mrs. Morrison." Sebastian kept his voice level, professional. "What can I get for you today?" "Oh, I'm not here for food, darling." Catherine's smile was razor sharp. "I'm here to deliver a message from your parents." Sebastian's hands stilled on the prep counter. Beside him, Savannah went very quiet. "They miss you, Sebastian. They're willing to forgive this little experiment if you come home. Today. Your father has even arranged for the wedding to Madison to be rescheduled quietly. No media, no fuss. Just family. And if I don't?" Catherine's expression hardened. "Then you'll continue this charade until you realize what everyone else already knows, that you weren't meant for this life. Look at yourself, Sebastian. You're living in squalor, working for pennies, pretending to be someone you're not. Maybe I'm discovering who I actually am. Don't be ridiculous." Catherine's voice rose, drawing more attention. "You're Sebastian Cross. You were born to lead, to build empires, to marry well and carry on your family's legacy. This," she gestured dismissively at the food truck, "is beneath you. Nothing honest is beneath anyone," Sebastian said quietly. "How noble, and how naive." Catherine pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "Do you know what Cross Industries stock is trading at today? Down 30% since you walked out. Your little rebellion isn't just destroying your life, Sebastian. It's destroying thousands of jobs, millions in shareholder value, decades of your family's work." Sebastian stared at the numbers, feeling the weight of unintended consequences. He'd been so focused on his own freedom that he hadn't considered the ripple effects. "One phone call," Catherine continued, sensing weakness. "One phone call and you can fix all of this. Save the company, save the jobs, save your family from the embarrassment you've caused." Sebastian felt the eyes of everyone around him, customers, neighboring food truck owners, passers-by who'd recognized the drama unfolding. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few openly judgmental. He thought about the night shifts in his tiny apartment, the ache in his bones, the constant worry about making rent. He thought about his parents, whom he missed more than he'd ever admit. He thought about the weight of responsibility he'd carried his entire life, now transferred to consequences he'd never anticipated. Then he looked at Savannah. She was watching him with an expression of quiet intensity, and he realized this wasn't just about Catherine's ultimatum. This was the test Savannah had been waiting for, the moment when his commitment would be truly challenged, when the easy answers ran out and he had to choose who he really was. "Mrs. Morrison," Sebastian said finally, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet food truck area. "I appreciate you coming all this way to deliver the message. Please tell my parents that I understand their concerns about the company and the family reputation." Catherine smiled, sensing victory. "But also tell them," Sebastian continued, "that for the first time in my life I'm exactly where I belong." The smile faded from Catherine's face. Around them, the crowd of onlookers seemed to exhale collectively. "You're making a mistake, Sebastian." Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Catherine looked at him for a long moment, then at Savannah, then back at him. When you're ready to come home, really ready, call your father. But don't wait too long. Even family patience has limits. She returned to her town car and drove away, leaving Sebastian standing in front of his food truck, shaking slightly from adrenaline and the magnitude of what he'd just reaffirmed. The crowd dispersed slowly, customers returning to their orders, life resuming its rhythm. But Sebastian remained frozen, processing what had just happened. "Hey," Savannah said softly, touching his arm. "You okay?" Sebastian looked down at her hand on his arm, then up into her sea-glass eyes. In them, he saw something he'd been hoping for but hadn't dared expect: respect. "Yeah," he said, surprising himself with how true it felt. "I'm okay." "Good. Because we've got the evening rush to prep for and I need my partner at full strength." Partner, not employee, not charity case. Partner. Sebastian smiled and got back to work, chopping vegetables with hands that no longer shook, serving customers who were becoming friends, building something real in a world that finally felt like home. Outside, San Francisco hummed with its usual energy, indifferent to the small revolution happening inside one food truck where a man was learning that the hardest thing in life wasn't earning money. It was earning yourself. 6 months later, Golden Gate Park. Saturday evening, the Castro Street Fair had been their biggest day ever. Sebastian's hand still ached from 12 hours of nonstop service. His shirt was stained with everything from coffee to barbecue sauce, and he'd never felt more accomplished in his life. "We actually pulled it off," Savannah said, collapsing onto the park bench where they'd shared their first real conversation 6 months ago. The setting sun painted the bay in shades of gold and crimson, and the city sparkled like a promise below them. "We?" Sebastian sat beside her, close enough to smell her perfume beneath the lingering scents of the food truck. "You mean you pulled it off, and I tried not to ruin everything?" "You didn't ruin anything." Savannah turned to look at him, and Sebastian's breath caught at the softness in her sea-glass eyes. "You were amazing today. The way you handled that rush when the espresso machine broke down, how you calmed down that customer who was furious about the wait time. You've become someone completely different. Or maybe I've become who I was supposed to be all along." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city they'd both chosen in different ways. 6 months ago, Sebastian had been a stranger to struggle, to honest work, to the satisfaction of earning something through sweat and determination. Now, looking at his calloused hands and feeling the deep tiredness of meaningful labor, he couldn't imagine going back to his old life. "Sebastian," Savannah said quietly, "can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? Giving up everything for this?" She gestured between them, the question heavy with 6 months of unspoken feelings. Sebastian thought about his answer carefully. 6 months of living paycheck to paycheck, of 12-hour days, of sleeping in a studio apartment that rattled every time the neighbors upstairs walked around. 6 months of his family's silence, of watching his former friends cross the street to avoid him, of being nobody special in a world that worshipped status above all else. "Never," he said, and meant it completely. "But I need to tell you something." Savannah tensed beside him. "What?" "I got a call yesterday from James." Sebastian pulled out his phone and showed her the message thread. "My father had a heart attack last week." Savannah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Is he okay?" "He's stable, but the doctors say it was stress-related." Sebastian's voice was heavy with guilt he'd been carrying for days. "The company's been struggling without strong leadership. The board appointed Madison as interim CEO, but she doesn't have the institutional knowledge to navigate the current crisis. They're facing a hostile takeover." "Sebastian, if Cross Industries falls, it's not just my family that suffers. It's 12,000 employees, their families, dozens of smaller companies that depend on our contracts." Sebastian looked out at the city, seeing it differently now, not just as a playground for the wealthy, but as a place where real people worked and struggled and tried to build better lives. I understand responsibility in a way I never did before. Are you going back? Savannah's voice was barely above a whisper. Sebastian turned to face her fully. That depends on you. On me? Savannah Blake. Sebastian slid off the bench and onto one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. 6 months ago, you challenged me to discover who I really was, without money and power. You made me prove that my feelings for you were real, not just rebellion against a life I didn't want. Savannah stared at the ring box, her eyes wide with shock. This ring cost me 2 months' salary, Sebastian continued, his voice shaking with emotion. It's not a 5-carat diamond from Tiffany. It's a simple solitaire from a pawnshop on Mission Street. But I bought it with money I earned with my own hands, and it represents something more valuable than anything I ever owned before. He opened the box, revealing a modest but beautiful diamond ring that caught the last rays of sunlight. It represents the man you helped me become. Someone who knows the value of work, of integrity, of earning love instead of expecting it as a birthright. Sebastian's eyes never left hers. Savannah, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Savannah's face as she stared at him. This man who had given up an empire for the chance to prove himself worthy of her love. There's more, Sebastian said when she didn't immediately answer. James told me something else. The board is willing to reinstate me as CEO if I return immediately and marry Madison as originally planned. It would save the company, protect all those jobs, restore my family's legacy. Savannah's heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying that for the first time in my life I have a real choice to make. Not between what my father wants and what I think I want, but between two versions of love. Love for you, for the life we could build together. And love for the people who would suffer if I choose my own happiness over their security. Sebastian reached up and touched her face gently. So I'm asking you to make the choice with me. Marry me and we'll build something beautiful together, just the two of us. Or tell me to go back to save the company and honor the responsibility I was born to carry. Sebastian, you can't put that decision on me. I'm not putting it on you. I'm offering to share it. Because that's what partners do. His smile was radiant even through his tears. Whatever we choose together. Savannah looked down at this man who had knelt before her twice now, once covered in mustard and confusion, now covered in dignity and purpose. The transformation was so complete it took her breath away. If you go back, she said carefully, you'd have to marry Madison. Yes. And you'd be CEO again, wealthy, powerful, back in your old world. Yes. But you wouldn't be happy. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. I'd be fulfilled in a different way, knowing I'd done my duty, protected people who depend on me. It wouldn't be happiness, but it might be peace. Savannah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 12,000 jobs, of Sebastian's father's health, of the ripple effects that powerful families couldn't escape even when they tried. Then she opened them and saw the man she'd fallen in love with, not the billionaire heir or the food truck worker, but the person who had learned to value integrity over image, partnership over possession, real love over convenient arrangement. Sebastian Cross, she said, slipping off the bench to kneel with him on the grass. 6 months ago you asked me what we risk for love. I remember. Everything, she whispered. We risk everything. She took the ring from the box with trembling fingers. And you know what? Some things are worth the risk. She slipped the ring onto her own finger, then threw her arms around his neck as he swept her up in a kiss that tasted like freedom and mustard, and the promise of forever. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. So we're really doing this? Choosing love over responsibility? We're choosing love and responsibility, Savannah corrected. Love for each other, responsibility to build something meaningful together. The company will find another way to survive. Your family will heal. But if we don't take this chance, we'll never get another one. Sebastian spun her around as the San Francisco skyline glittered behind them. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and chosen each other against impossible odds. Besides, Savannah added, grinning up at him, I have an idea about how we can help those 12,000 employees. Oh, really? Cross Industries might be struggling, but they've never tried expanding into food service. I happen to know someone who could teach them about running efficient, profitable small operations. Sebastian stared at her, then threw back his head and laughed, the sound carrying across Golden Gate Park like music. Savannah Cross, he said, testing out her new name. I think you're going to revolutionize my family's business model. I think we both are. They walked back toward the food truck together, hands intertwined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because some love stories don't end with choosing between worlds. Sometimes they end with creating a new world entirely. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best love stories begin with mustard. The end.